Have you ever been afraid of being inside of your own house? What would you do if there was something outside that you couldn't explain? Last night started off pretty normal. Most of the downstairs lights were off when I got home. Nicole doesn't mean to do it, but she always seems to forget that I work the graveyard shift. It was nothing to be angry about though. I simply planned to bust her chops for forgetting again the next morning. I hadn't eaten anything in the last few hours, so rather than going straight to bed like I always do, I decided to pop a frozen pizza in the microwave, just to silence my growling stomach. Once I opened the beeping microwave, I saw that its clock read 2:49 a.m. I almost regretted staying up this late to eat this pizza. I could feel my eyelids getting heavier and heavier as time passed. Rather than move to the table to eat, I ate right in front of the microwave. I just wanted to get some food in me and get some rest before I had to follow the same tiring schedule all over again the next day. From where I was eating, my front door was roughly 90 degrees to my left and about 15 feet away. I could see my front door and the small window beside it if I was looking that way, but at that point I wasn't focused on anything other than my pizza. Out of the corner of my eye, I noticed the motion lights had just unexpectedly turned out. Other than being surprised, I didn't pay much attention to it at that time. We live in a pretty wooded area and get animals moving around through our yard all the time. After a minute, the lights clicked back off. I assumed that whatever had triggered them must have been scared off by the lights. I returned to inhaling my pizza. Once I was done eating, I dragged myself to the stairs with what little energy I had left in my body. To get to the stairs, you have to walk into the front entryway and pass by the front windows. Without thinking, I took a look out of my front window and was immediately jolted awake as my heart pounded like it was going to leap out of my chest. Standing in my yard about 20 feet away from my front door was a man. Well, the outline of what seemed to be a man. There are no streetlights on our street, so the only lights in our yard were the motion lights we installed when we move in, and the dim light we keep in our entryway, radiating out the front windows to the yard. All I could see was this outline, with his head craned upwards, as if he was looking at the stars or something. I didn't really know what to do. It was a freaky sight to see, but we live in a small and secluded community. We know everyone who lives around us, and our neighbors are all very trustworthy people. I figured this person was someone I knew, so I tapped on the window to get the person's attention. I didn't want to wake Nicole, so I tried to stay as quiet as possible. He didn't budge. No reaction at all. I figured that whoever it was out there could hear me, so I opened the door. I was scared beyond belief. But at the end of the day, I try to see the best in people. The figure in my yard hadn't really done anything for me to call the police. I just wanted to resolve this and go to bed. As the door creaked open, I realized the figure had changed slightly. He was now staring right at me. It was jarring. 2 seconds prior, when looking out the window, he was just staring upwards. I couldn't make out the finer points of his features yet, as the light from the house barely reached him, and I thought that made him look even more creepy. The figure just started to walk backwards towards the road, while still facing me. As the person sped up slightly, the motion lights finally came back on. He wasn't anyone I'd seen before. He was pretty tall, maybe 6'4", and so skinny he looked like a skeleton. He truly looked like he had never eaten anything a day in his life, and he was completely hairless. No eyebrows, no facial hair, and bald. I was speechless as this seemingly mute and sickly person just silently observed me, and I quickly realized that he was less terrifying when he was obscured by the shadows. He turned and ran away from me through my yard, across the road, and into the woods on the other side of the road. I was frozen in fear. Neither fight nor flight kicked in for me. Had this person wanted to hurt me or Nicole, he had his chance, but he didn't take it. I locked the door and went upstairs, not really sure of what to do. I couldn't really have called the police once he was gone, could I? I mean, this guy didn't really do anything. Sure, he was on private property, but I'm sure the police wouldn't take it seriously. I figured it was useless, and that I'd rather keep my guard up just in case this man came back tonight, and I'll worry about calling the police later. I got very little sleep. I was sure that every rustle of the leaves or every gust of wind was the trespasser returning. I finally shut my eyes at 6 a.m. when the sun started to rise, but was up when I heard Nicole shuffling to the shower around 8.
Didn't expect you to be up. Aren't you sleepy?
Yeah, but I couldn't really sleep. Tough night of work and all that. Since I'm up, why don't you make me some breakfast before you go to work? She smiled and nodded in appreciation. I wanted to tell her about the events from a few hours prior, but I knew it would freak her out. I thought maybe her favorite dish of bacon and eggs would make the news easier for her. Really dumb logic in hindsight, but I guess I was still experiencing fear-induced shock.
What are we gonna do?
Nicole was trying to be calm, but I knew that she was freaked out. I told her there wasn't much for us to do right now. We argued a little bit, and she made it clear that she really wanted to call the police. I still didn't think it was a good idea. We had zero evidence to prove that anyone was there in our yard the previous night. Or so I thought.
What about those cameras that Mrs. Case installed? Didn't you link them up to your laptop when we moved in or something?
We moved in 5 years ago because this house was a lot closer to both of our jobs. It was kind of out in the middle of nowhere, but we liked the privacy the community offered. We bought the house from Kobe Case, whose mother was an old widower, living alone for a few years. She had been petrified of the neighborhood ever since the death of her husband. Her son sold the house on her behalf so that she could live with him, hopefully living out the final years of her life in peace, and Kobe with their wife and kids. Before she moved out, she had Kobe install a few cameras outside her house, just to provide her a peace of mind. The thing were cheap pieces of junk, and Kobe himself said they rarely looked at them. But it turns out they actually came in handy. I shrugged. I guess you're the brains in the relationship after all, Nicole. I'll call the boys in blue and deal with them and the cameras before I head off for work. In the meantime, do me a favor and don't get too upset about all this. That was easier said than done, but I actually think she was a lot calmer once I actually started to take her police suggestions seriously. I kissed her goodbye and went out to work things out. I poured myself a coffee and got to work. I was half expecting the cameras to work, given their age. I opened the software and after 15-ish minutes of updates, finally saw a live feed of 4 different cameras outside. The camera in the driveway was angled poorly to the point where you could only see a small sliver of the driveway and dense foliage, while the back and side cameras showed mostly foliage and the fenced portion of our yard. Kobe had done a crappy job setting up most of the cameras, but the front camera was set up perfectly. The front camera was angled perfectly to have captured our uninvited visitor. I went into the database and found last night's camera feeds. Sure enough, at 2:54 a.m., the man crept out from the shadows and into our front yard. There it was. Concrete, undeniable proof. I called the police and they took me very seriously once I told them I had video evidence of the intruder. The operator said that 2 officers would be sent to my home to view last night's video and to file a police report. But my relief was short-lived. Something the operator said made the hairs stand up on the back of my neck.
Has this individual showed up on any of the cameras on any other night?
All at once, I realized how terrifying this possibility was. I mean, how many times did I lay awake in bed and see the front lights click at odd hours of the night? Like I said, it was a pretty regular occurrence for us. I immediately checked the feed from the night before I encountered the man face to face. I wasn't sure when he might come, so I started at 9 p.m. I played it at 2x speed and made it through the night without anything of note. Momentary relief. I went back one more night. At 12:36 a.m., he creeps into the yard and triggers the front motion lights. But it got even worse. He stayed there, motionless, in complete darkness until just about 5 a.m. He was so still for almost 5 hours that he didn't even trigger the motion lights again until he turned around and left for the day. Think about that. While our motion lights aren't very sensitive, I know for a fact that something as simple as a head jerk from a sneeze would set them off. This guy was essentially a statue for almost 5 hours. The police arrived and I told the 2 officers about this new development, and they were uncomfortable. Sergeant James, the veteran between the 2 officers, would later tell me that he never saw anything like this in the 23 years he'd been on the job. We went through 33 days worth of video logs and found that the man came to my home on 27 of those nights. Besides the night I interrupted him, his briefest stay lasted 22 minutes and 15 seconds, 5 days ago. His longest stay occurred early last week. He arrived at 11:57 p.m. and left at 6:13 a.m. He always stands in a similar spot in our front yard, about 20 feet from the door. I called in sick for work tonight because I can't begin to describe how little I want Nicole to be alone at this house when night falls. I'm terrified. So are the cops, especially since they don't have this person for much. So far, all the evidence shows is trespassing and loitering on private property. If they were to catch him in the act and not find anything to charge him with, he'd probably just get a fine or brief stint in jail. They claim they'll have patrol cars scouring the area tonight, and 1 car stationed in front of my house all night, which makes me feel somewhat better. But their lack of answers and their obvious uneasiness about all this makes me extremely nervous. Nicole comes home in an hour, and it will be dark soon. If anyone here knows anything about the situation, or just has a theory, or spots a detail that I miss, please let me know in the comments. I will update you all when or if we learn more about this situation, or if something of note occurs. Until then, let's just hope we make it through the night tonight. We survived, but I can't stop thinking about what that thing is. Last night was quiet, almost too quiet. The police were outside all night, and thankfully, no sign of him. Around 2 a.m., I heard the officers outside. They told me that they saw him, but he was gone when they checked. Now, I'm not superstitious, but I'm trying to figure out who or what this thing is. Researching Wendigos and skinwalkers has only made me more afraid. I really hope that's not what we're dealing with. I do have a shotgun, though I've never used it. I haven't told Nicole about our guest showing up on multiple nights. I said the police were outside as a favor, not because they suspect something worse. She had a stalker in college, and even after 8 years, it still bothers her. I tried to get her to go to her sister's house, but she just wouldn't leave me. This morning, I bought new lights. 14 of them. Every inch of our property will be lit up while the timer is active. I also borrowed some game cameras from Aaron. I never knew game cameras could be triggered by either sound or motion. But the quicker we can get back to normal, the better. I got home around noon and set everything up. It was a pain in the ass, but I repositioned the old security cameras. It took way longer than I wanted it to be. But now, the driveway camera is the best camera. It literally shows everything. It covers every inch of the driveway. If that thing is outside, we will get a clear picture of what it is. I also put Aaron's game cameras in the woods. I just need to find out what this thing is. Is it a crackhead? Is it something else? I feel like I'm going crazy, thinking of all the things it could be. I wish it was just somebody high on drugs, but something deep down inside tells me that it's something else. It's after 4 p.m., and I'm going through older camera footage. Ever since I locked eyes with that thing, I've just been on a freaking mission to find out what it is and getting it away from us. I'm going all the way back to when the cases lived here. Holy smokes! He's in the footage from 8 years ago. I went back and checked the first 3 nights, and he's there every night. Those videos are all the same. Motionless. Like a statue. Maybe this is the reason Mrs. Case was so uneasy and had the cameras put up in the first place. Nobody wanted to believe her. They all thought she was going crazy or had dementia. But this was proof. She saw something. I'm gonna call Kobe. I've gotta speak with Mrs. Case. Damn. Kobe's mom passed away this year. I hope she found peace. I asked Kobe if he ever noticed anything on the security cameras, but he had admitted he never checked them. Judging the way the initial cameras were, I knew he never touched them. But when I told him that I saw someone, he was speechless. I thought he hung up. He confessed that he always ignored his mother's fears, thinking she was just getting old. His mom used to mention seeing a tall man in the yard. He told me something else that was pretty disturbing. One night in August, a month before we bought the house, his mom called him, frantic. She said there were people talking in the basement. Kobe raced over, but she was just cowering in the living room, scared out of her mind. No one was there. He checked the house for a break-in and didn't find anything. I lied and said the man only showed up once on the cameras while his mom lived there. But she was obviously seeing something. After all this, I'm worried now. What voices did she hear? Do I have to worry about those voices she heard in the basement? I hate going down there as it is. I feel like Kevin McAllister from Home Alone when he went down there and the furnace growled at him. I don't like this house. Thankfully, we haven't had anything like that going on. But now I'm worried that there might be someone or something else lurking inside the walls of our homes, not just in our yard. What if they're both tied together? Nicole's here. I'm just trying to stay calm. She's upstairs sleeping. Hopefully it's a quiet night. It's almost 10:30 and the police aren't here yet. I'm in the office with energy drinks and my shotgun, watching cameras. I plan on watching the live feeds until the sun rises and I can feel safe again. I've been watching for an hour and I think I see something. In the shadows, crouched by the woods near the driveway. It's him! He's motionless. He just twitched. I'm calling the police. They're on their way, but it'll be 20 minutes. I'm not that worried, I've got the gun. Can be. But I'm taking it in the laptop to the bedroom and locking the door. I can't leave Nicole alone. Once I get to the bedroom, I look at the camera and I don't see him. You're telling me in that little amount of time he moved? I find him at the end of the yard, by the road. He's looking up at the camera, at me. Shivers go through my body as we lock eyes. I know we live in a secluded neighborhood, but he just sprinted towards the door. He's banging on the door. The front door splintered, monstrous crack echoing throughout the house. I shoved Nicole into the closet, the metal tang of the shotgun filling my mouth. My heart hammered against my ribs, each beat a frantic drum against the silence. I knew, with a chilling certainty, that whatever was on the other side of the door was coming in. The door splintered again, then crashed, then silence. All of a sudden, we heard deep thumps on the floor as it entered the house. I could hear it moving, coming through the front door. All of a sudden, I swear I could have heard its voice. Nicole's eyes mirrored my own terror, barely managing to whisper.
He's saying words.
It was a growling, wet rasp, like something being dragged across gravel. Mixed with it were these choked, almost human gasps, as if the creature was in pain, or struggling to breathe, or trying to speak. It was something like, the sounds repeated like a broken record, chilling me to the bone. It was a garbled chant, like something ancient and evil. As it moved through the front hallway, it scraped the walls. The sound was like nails scraping across a chalkboard, except 1,000 times stronger, each scrape digging deep into my brain. Then suddenly, our house went silent again. 5 minutes stretched into an eternity. Then a shriek, raw, animalistic, ripped through the silence, followed by a now familiar thunder of heavy footsteps. It was inside the house, sprinting, almost like it knew where we were. My heart was pounding. A door splintered downstairs. The basement. Then the silence came again. Suddenly, shouts erupted from below.
Police! Come out!
Relief washed over me, but a sliver of doubt lingered. Was this thing pretending to be the police? 20 minutes after my frantic 911 call, the house was swarming. The knocking on the closet door was insistent.
It's Sergeant James.
Recognition flooded me. He'd been here before, when I first reported the strange noises. He pulled the closet door open, his face grim.
Let's get you out of here.
He escorted us out, Nicole trembling beside me. Outside, the flashing lights of patrol cars painted the scene in stark blues and reds. Officers with weapons drawn surrounded the house. Only then, seeing their determined faces, did I finally dare to breathe. An ambulance waited, paramedics ready. After a quick check, Sergeant James ushered us into his car.
We're going to the station.
His voice was calm, but his eyes held a flicker of something I couldn't quite place. Even as Sergeant James hurried us out, my eyes were drawn to the carnage in the entryway. The front door was a mangled mess. Splintered wood splayed across the floor. Deep gouges, far too wide for human fingernails, clawed at the doorframe. It was something else, something more disturbing that held my gaze. A dark crimson trail began on the porch, splashed across the broken door, and snaked its way across the floor. A jagged line pointing directly to the basement door. Obviously, my first guess would be blood. I mean, it looked like blood, thick and dark, but something felt wrong. The sheer quantity of it, the unnatural way it glistened in the dim light, it didn't quite seem human. The police hadn't said a word about it, even when I pressed them. What was it? And why was it everywhere? At the station, Nicole and I huddled together, numb. The adrenaline had worn off, leaving only a bone-deep weariness and a gnawing fear. We clung to each other, the silence only broken by the occasional crying. The questioning began before dawn. Most of it was a blur, rehashing already what I've told them. But then, one detective leaned forward, his voice low.
Those marks on your door? Your walls? They weren't made by human hands.
He described them. Too deep, too wide, too precise.
We think it was something else.
They told us we couldn't go back. We ended up finding a room at a nearby hotel. Safe in the sterile quiet of the motel room, I tried to convince myself it was over. The police were in charge now. The nightmare was finally contained. Exhaustion claimed me. 2 days of terror catching up in a heavy wave. Finally, sleep. The shrill ring of my phone jolted me awake. My hand trembled as I answered. It was Detective Laird. My stomach clenched. Had they found something?
We need to talk about your house. How many exits are there?
3, I replied. Front door, back door, basement storm door, and the windows, of course.
Your house. It's surrounded by police. It has been since we arrived, but no one has seen anything leave.
He interrupted. A long silence stretched between us, heavy with unspoken words. Then Laird spoke again, his voice barely a whisper.
We've searched the house, every room, every closet. There's no sign of him or it anywhere.
A cold dread crept up my spine. My breath hitched. He paused, and I could hear the strain in his voice.
I even reviewed the footage from your laptop. Every second. Over and over. Nothing. It's like it vanished.
My mind reeled. Vanished? How? Fear, raw and primal, clawed its way back to my throat. If it wasn't gone, then where was it? And a chilling thought echoed in my mind. Was it still inside of the house? Waiting? My chest seized, a vice crushing my lungs. I gasped, the world tilting. Cold sweat erupted, each drop a tiny explosion of ice on my skin. Laird's words echoed.
Nothing. It's like it vanished.
I shouldn't have slept, but exhaustion dragged me under. And what a dream it was. Vivid, terrifyingly real. I stood at the edge of the Crimson Trail, darker now, pulsing like a vein leading to the basement. My stomach churned. Each step down was a descent into dread. The air grew thick, heavy with damp earth and something ancient, something wrong. A low hum vibrated through the floor, a tremor in my bones. The basement loomed. It had always unsettled me, a sense of something wrong lurking in the shadows. In the main room, Nicole stood with her back to me. Her shoulders shook, whimpers escaping her lips. "Nicole?" I called. The trembling stopped, but when she turned, her eyes didn't meet mine. Something was off with her.
We never leave.
She whispered, a chilling echo.
We never leave.
The Crimson Trail snaked into the unfinished room. The door was gone, splintered wood littering the floor. The room was a void, darkness so complete it pressed against my skin. Yet, I saw a figure, human-shaped, roughly my height. It wasn't the creature, though. It stretched out an arm, then vanished, yanked back into the abyss. Nicole, on all fours, crawled after it. I tried to move, to stop her, but I was frozen, a prisoner in my own nightmare. I jolted awake, 8:13 a.m., safe. For now. The dream was too real, the details too sharp. It was a message, a summons. I had to go back. Nicole wanted to leave, to run. Part of me agreed. But the dream, it was pulling at me, an insistent whisper. I lied to Nicole. One last trip from my car. The house swarmed with cops, but something was different. The air was thick with tension, a sense of unease that went beyond the usual crime scene buzz. Laird's face was drawn.
Still, nothing.
He repeated, his words laced with tension. Laird was evasive, his eyes darting away when I asked about my laptop.
Virus.
He mumbled, a flimsy excuse. I felt it again. Something hidden. A lie. I knew it, but I didn't argue. Not yet. As I walked to my car, I remembered the game cameras. A chance to see what they were hiding. I'd go back that night. A stupid, reckless plan, but I was being drawn back to the darkness. I nervously drove around until nightfall. Finally, I made my way back to the house at about 9:30. Suffocating silence, broken only by the frantic pounding of my own heart. The house was empty. No cops, no forensic teams. Just a couple of hours ago, this house was so lively. But now, The silence was unnerving. The house felt empty, yet watched. I had to try and find some answers before I went insane. Inside, the scene mirrored my dream. The crimson trail, the broken door, the suffocating darkness. I felt like I was reliving it. I wanted to turn around, but instead I found myself at the top of the stairs. I hesitated, then descended, each step a surrender to dread. The basement door was a shattered mess. The crimson stain disappeared into the black maw of the unfinished room. I took a step, and the floor screamed. Then, I heard them. Whispers rising from the darkness. Voices. Multiple voices. Speaking in a language I didn't understand. Yet somehow, I could feel it. These had to be the voices Mrs. Case was hearing when she lived here. They argued, murmured. A cacophony of dread.
Does anyone remain?
One voice rasped.
I live in the dark.
Another whispered. A woman cried, a sound that chilled me. I took another step. The floorboard groaned. The whisper stopped. The crying ceased. Silence, absolute and terrifying, descended. I ran. Forget the truth and forget those game cameras. I didn't want to end up in the basement with whatever was down there. I didn't stop until I reached my car. As I started the engine, I saw it. The creature. He was facing away from me, looking inside my house. As if it knew I was looking at it, it turned its head 180 degrees to look at me. We locked eyes. It wore the same confused look on his face that he had when I accidentally discovered him a few nights ago. It mouthed something, a word I couldn't understand, and sprinted into the house. I'm writing this from my parents' beach house, over 400 miles away. Nicole is here, but the fear is a constant companion. I still look over my shoulder every time I hear the settling of this house, or the crackling of the AC as it turns on. We'll try to forget, but last night, I dreamed again. I was back in the basement. Nicole was there, her eyes still averted. The crying was closer, and this time, I understood what she was whispering. It wasn't "we never leave." It was something far more terrifying. She was whispering my name over and over, each repetition laced with a chilling intimacy. Then, the creature's voice, raspy and close, echoed in the darkness, answering her call.
He's coming. He's coming home.